Here on this rainy day. Thanks for coming in. And to you, Colia, so good to see you, darling. Really good, as always. And in the audience, welcome very much to Conversations. We have two guests on this program. And on my far left is a dear friend of mine in the world, and that's Colia Clark. People who view Conversations will know we've had programs in the past. She's a pioneer, a civil rights worker. Had worked with Martin King and Stokely Carmichael and a lot of other people down Mississippi in the early days of the civil rights movement. And Colia, it's really good to see you again. And on my immediate left, new to me, and we just introduced each other, Don DeBar. And he has been at WBAI, and we're going to be talking about events at WBAI in some depth and putting it in a larger context if we can. Don, welcome very much to Conversation. Maybe you could kick it off first, Don, by, if you would, please, share your background a little bit and a little bit of the BAI, and then we'll get into the discussion of what's going on. But could you share your own background a little bit first, please?
Yeah, my background in media began about 30 years ago as a public access TV producer, actually,
no kidding,
up
really?
in Westchester County.
Okay.
I started at a place called McLean Cable TV in Tarrytown, and up through just the past few months, I've been a regular producer for that company and the successor companies. It's now Optimum/Cablevision.
Well, is that a public access? Not public. It was public access. They're doing it, so they're working out of there.
Yes.
Of public access. Good. Yeah. I have great faith in the public access. I think it's really important. It should be safeguarded. The same way it seems to me WBAI ought to be safeguarded. I think there's a relationship between the two.
One relationship, actually, I could just say, as a public access producer yourself, you know, and as someone at MNN, Tony Riddle, who is one of the people that has recently been a victim of the coup at BAI. It's probably, if there's one person in the country that's responsible for public access surviving the Clinton and Bush years, would be Tony as the head of the Alliance for Community Media.
He was down there, yeah, and he had also been at Atlanta. I think it was with Andy Young. And he was also in Minnesota, where they got a real good system going, and then he was our executive director here. And so Tony's a great guy, and I'm sorry to hear that. I talked to him briefly, and he's not quite ready to address things, but I think it was quite a shock of what's been going on. But I want a little of your own background, a little more if you could.
Sure.
Born, raised, a little bit educated that, and because I know you're very involved in media. Yeah. I
was born in Ogden, Utah, at Hill Air Force Base when my father was in the Air Force in 1954. My parents are both from Westchester County. My father grew up in Ossining, New York, which is where I live now, and my mother grew up in North Tarrytown, which is now called Sleepy Hollow. It's the next town down, basically. Really
nice up there.
Yeah, it's nice. Ossining I'm particularly fond of, although it is lower scale in terms of the construction, you know, architecturally than New York City. There's a very good mixture of people in terms of every measurement that's used statistically, income, the racial composition, nationalities, languages. And so growing up there, on the one hand, it was small enough to be able to apprehend as a child and as an adolescent, and on the other hand, I wasn't living in isolation, you know, in isolation from other people, and so I've, you know, more or less grew up with somebody that's just like somebody else everywhere.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because Ossining is associated with Sing Sing, and we have this great growth industry in our society now. It's just growing by leaps and bounds. The industrial prison industry that's growing. I have 2.5 million people now incarcerated. Right. So Sing Sing's been there all along.
Oh yeah, it looms.
You feel like a pioneer.
Right? Well, you know, it's always been there. One of the things that was, first of all, the name Ossining itself.
We're getting feedback in here.
By allowing positions.
They're playing the.
Why are they playing something?
On different
We're hearing noise.
He's playing the B-roll.
Confronted by.
Okay, well we'll talk over it and we'll be getting to that. That's some B-roll that's playing in the background, but we can get to it. So you got involved in communications early on, right?
Yes, I did. And I just wanted to say first that the name Ossining itself was changed from Sing Sing. The village was originally called Sing Sing.
Was it really?
Prior to the construction of the prison in the mid-19th century. And because the prison labor was used to manufacture goods because it was free or extremely cheap to
Yeah,
the prisoners.
slave labor is really great. I mean, it's free.
During the 19th century, this work had a, culturally and socially, it was frowned upon by working people particularly, and so the people who had other businesses in Ossining wanted to disassociate themselves from that, so they changed the name to Ossining in 1901.
Well, anyway, and then why don't we give Colia a chance, okay? You're up in Mississippi originally, and just share a little of that, and then we'll get to the BAI stuff.
Yeah, I'm originally from Jackson, Mississippi, born, of course, in the woods, so I'm out at near Learned, Mississippi.
Yeah.
Grew up in, of course, in those days of Jim Crow and Jim Crow South. Went to colored school and grew up in a very wonderfully fine matriarchal system, a male-run, but matriarchal nonetheless, with wonderful culture and art and music and drama and white folk who didn't have good sense.
Yeah, right. A lot of that,
A whole lot of that.
Now with that, and you were there early on, and you did work with Mr. King, didn't you?
I started out with Medgar Wiley Evers in in Mississippi, and then went to Robert Moses and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Okay.
And then, of course, worked with King throughout, began with Birmingham, and then, of course, Chicago and Selma. So
you were at all those places?
And the National People. My husband and I set up the Black Belt Alabama Project for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Good for you,
and with headquarters at Selma in '63. King actually took our project in '65.
Okay,
that was not his. That's ours.
There was stuff going back in the 40s. I think there was stuff going on in Cro-Magnon caves against slavery. It has been there for so long, and then you had all the stuff in the 50s, and you had finally desegregate the. It's just a nightmare. I mean, they used to have the Fugitive Slave Act. If a slave escaped up the Underground Railroad or something, you had to turn him in, or else you were breaking the law of the United States of America.
Even if you were a judge.
I mean, it's a nightmare.
Even if you were a judge, you went to jail.
Right. It's a nightmare of that, and then we didn't let the women vote until 1920. Maybe, and things have been screwed up since 1920. Some people were saying maybe we should go back and take that vote away from the women. Do you think that'd be a good idea, Cole? Yeah.
But it will be a fight.
Maybe we can go all the way back to chattel slavery. There's some people that have a conservative. That'd be even bigger.
That'd be a war.
We'd have you on both fronts on that, right? Right on the barricades, right?
Yeah, so then, of course, the student movement, and from the student movement into mainline peace movement, we put people against the war. Been through it all. So.
Yeah, and also Stokely. Or Kwame Ture.
Stokely, that's my
great
boy
guy.
from SNCC. Beginning in Mississippi in '61 when they came in with the Freedom Rides.
And he took the name of Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana, and Kwame Nkrumah is the voice of Pan African organization. Happy to report that there is a serious movement on to establish the United States of Africa.
The AU actually has, the Organization of African States became the African Union.
Now it is.
And the African Union has established the 6th region of Africa, which would be the Western Hemisphere. That's both North and South Americas. Wonderful move forward. It means that Africans in the United States, as well as Canada, Mexico, Central and South American islands, are now being considered as voting citizens.
Africans, you say?
Yeah, Africans. Yeah, we are Africans.
There's another movement of the indigenous nations. Sacagawea, out in Vancouver now, he got arrested again. He's always getting arrested for going into a place where Mr. Bush was talking and claiming the man should be put in the dock for war crimes. And he got arrested, but he's beat it. And they're going to be bringing up, they call it the League of Indigenous Sovereign Nations.
Yes.
And the Indian peoples who have been roundly persecuted ever since the arrival of the Europeans on these shores. They're trying to get together an organization that would appeal to the indigenous people of what is called the New World. So that's another group that has been roundly persecuted.
And I can't let it slide. Sure, the Mohawk Nation is under total siege. There's no question about it as we speak. And we've got to do something about that. We've got to deal with that siege. But that's been a wonderful piece of information that came in with an archaeological discovery in 1975.
What was that?
In Brazil.
Yeah. They
discovered parts of a woman's body.
Oh, it goes back 40,000 years. And she was
12,000 years old.
12,000, well, 12,000.
And the oldest find in the Western world. But what's unique about it is that she's African. And of course they say she had to come in from Australia. African, yes, but she came in, they think, from Australia. They have parts of the community. They have some not quite, I think 500 years younger than her, all from this same place. But they've also discovered a 20,000-year-old boat. We got a lot to talk about.
20,000-year what?
A year-old boat, 20,000 years old. They came in by boats, 20,000 years old.
Well,
What we know is Australia
coming
today.
down Chimu, and there were some of that, but that 20,000 is pretty far back. And send me some links on that.
I will send you the whole
Please
story.
do. I would love it. I would love to have
it. It's a remarkable story. But it's good that you brought up the indigenous
Yeah.
nation. My grandmother would certainly salute you.
Are you?
I am an indigenous
indigenous
person on that
Yeah.
side. She
Yeah.
claimed Africa too.
I'm really.
Even though she had no African recent heritage, she still claimed Africa.
We're talking about progressive things, and we're going to be talking about that with that. And progressive means we're be inclusive of more and more people and so forth. But I think, in a certain sense, you just don't understand. I don't know what your background is, Don. I don't know what
My
your ethnic and all that. And you know, but I just wanted to make a point. I'm really in a terrible shape.
Why is that?
Well, I'm in progressive circles, and I'm a white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, heterosexual, male.
So that means you have a
of
lot of
royal
work
descent.
to do.
I have nobody that I can claim, because my people are the ones that are the establishment, and it's a terrible burden to carry. We should form a league of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male heterosexuals in order to support our cause, do you think?
Well,
or do you think they're well enough represented in the Congress and other...
I was going to say, I think they call it Congress and Wall Street.
Let's let that go.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. But you don't know how hard it is to not have an ethnic identity to which you can claim. Anyway, I was making a joke in a way. And so we needn't maybe go into that, but let's go into the BAI, okay, or the alternative media programming and so forth. That there is a challenge too. There's a big challenge now. We just did a program with Bernard White that aired earlier this week and so forth. But could you share a little bit of your understanding? How long have you been involved with BAI, and how do you see what's going? I know you have a couple or three clips that we're going to try and get into the program, but share a little bit of BAI for the audience who may not know it, and then bring us up to date on what you see going on.
I've been a producer at WBAI since for about 7 years. I've been an activist in Westchester County and larger region on some issues for much longer than that, most of my adult life, if not all of it. And actually, I was contacted in that area by Errol Maitland about 7 or 8 years ago, and asked if I would cover issues affecting the Hudson Valley, which is where I live. So I agreed to do that, and that was my first real contact with BAI. Because of my background in public access TV, I had some tech skills where I could produce my own materials, and I had some equipment, and so that was my beginning. About 2.5 years ago, Wake Up Call, the morning program, lost their news editor, and they had no budget to hire one. So I was approached by Sharan Harper, who is the executive producer of Wake Up Call, and she asked if I would, along with two young women who were interning, help to produce morning news for them. I would do 1 or 2 days a week, and the others would likewise split the labor. So I agreed to do it. One of them dropped out about 6 months, a year into it. You know, they're young. One had a book project. She left. The other had other pursuits. And about a year and a half ago, I think closer to a year and a half ago, I ended up producing it 4 days a week. And about a year ago, that went to 5. So my involvement is essentially for the last year, I've been the morning news headlines editor for the last year and a half.
A lot of responsibility.
Yes, it involves starting from scratch each day, reading every newspaper on the planet that bears on the things that are in the media, and
there
also
are a lot of newspapers.
Well, anything I would start. I would look at. Have to read the Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post. I'd look at Al Jazeera, Al Arabi, and whatever.
Not only newspapers, but also electronic things.
Yeah, well, this is all actually electronic.
You do a summary of the news. AP.
Exactly. Yeah, wire services, AP. Even I would look at the UPI, even though that's a Mooney source now. Well, I actually found a very
Moon?
Yes.
Reverend Moon?
Yes.
Is the Times also, Washington Times?
Washington Times also is, yes.
Yeah, he's got a lot of clout. He's got the place right down the corner from me. The New Yorker Hotel is owned by Reverend Moon.
Yeah, you have a lot of power, a lot of money to
Unification Church, Korea, that kind of thing, and everything. Okay.
So anyway, looking at scouring the various sources of information that are available and putting together a script for a 5 to 6 minute newscast to try to make sure that we cover the important things that day that people need to know about what's happening.
That's a hell of a responsibility.
Nationally, regionally, and locally.
Yeah. Now you have to do that. You do that all yourself. You did that all yourself.
People would send me. Yep. People would. I do it at I was doing it at my home.
Yeah.
And people would send me things, of course. You know, and I'm extremely grateful for that. I wish there were more people sending me things, but from that I would craft a script. I would read the script into a microphone, edit it, add music, send it over the internet, and have to have it there by 5 to 6 in the morning. 5 to 6 in the morning.
Did that mean that you were perforce a morning person? I mean, you would
requires getting up at between 3:45 and 4:15.
All those birds making all that noise, singing their morning songs.
Have a quiet spot in the house. My biggest problem actually is I have 3 basset hounds, and if one of them wakes up while I'm recording the news, then you hear, you know, toenails, and they make very loud noise.
Do you have cats?
No cats.
You don't have cats? They come and they meow.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, but that's a big job. And how would you craft that? How do you, if you're getting all the news of the world, it's the citizen's responsibility. How do you determine, or how do the editorial boards in New York Times or NBC or ABC? It's a big thing. They have a team. How do they determine what is going to lead? What's going to be the headline? What's really, because there's a welter of things coming in from all fields all the time. And how do you approach it? You've got a news take on things, but how do you approach it that you're going to highlight? Amy Goodman has the same thing, you know, with her program, what you're going to do.
I have, my formal training actually is in an entirely different area. It's in real property legal issues.
Yeah.
So it's not in journalism.
You have a legal background?
I'm an underwriter now. I'm an underwriter at a title insurance agency.
Okay, very important. Yeah.
So long story short, I've been reading newspapers since I was 4 years old. That's what my parents taught me to read on, and so and I used to read, you know, all 5 that were in New York at the time: the Mirror, the Daily News, and the Old Post, and the Tribune, and all of that. And so I had, you know, at least I'm familiar with the form more than the average person. I've always been interested in events, and so I've read a lot. I would look for reference to, you know, the quote-unquote major media first to see because they have people on the ground everywhere. They may not report all stories, and those that they do, they may not report accurately. There's a definite bend to it, but at least the fact that a bomb went off in downtown Tokyo or whatever would be reported by them. Then I would try to focus on local sources of information, and hopefully I have some historical understanding already from doing this where I can contextualize it and report it to people with a little more understanding than they would get out of reading it out of the New York Times.
That's a really important thing to be able to do, and how do you determine that? I think we have a thing on Google where they have the news that comes every 20 minutes done by algorithms. So you've got certain things you can put into there. Are you computer-wise and everything?
Much.
And you can take advantage of some of the cyber ability to recognize patterns?
The room that I work in to record the news, I have 3 computers set up in a bank, and then I have a laptop set up on a 4th, and all of them are processing things all the time in terms of, you know, acquiring information. Say something happened during, for example, the siege of Gaza. When I covered it, I would look at Haaretz, I would look at European newspapers, I would look at Arab information sources, Al Arabiya, for example, and I would look at alternative media for information, and I would try to pay as much attention to what their sources were as I could to see how much of it and how close to the ground the information was coming from. For example, Al Jazeera had people in Gaza. To me, that gave it a weight that perhaps somebody writing in New York, talking to somebody on the phone in Tel Aviv, didn't have.
And you were left to get your own sources in that position, and
That's
it was
what
up
the budget
to you to
allowed.
do it. And you could do a lot because of the internet now.
Yeah,
you could
so
do
absolutely.
that. It would have been hard for you to do if you didn't have a ticker tape back in the 20s or
That's
something like that. It's all advancing and that kind of stuff, and keeping track of the news. Well, that's really good. And then you would have to do bullet headlines or something on that morning report.
It's
so
a
you're giving the headlines.
program, so that's all it is.
So you had to pack it in.
First you take and write
and it's being
and then
oral.
you condense
Everything
it.
is being oral, so you're reading, right?
I'm reading, and also I'm grabbing sound clips. A lot of services would provide sound that I could use.
You need to integrate that in, edit that in, okay? And you could do it all and get it ready to go on the air, and you had a deadline.
And what I would do,
have to get it there right
have
before
3
the
deadlines.
deadline.
I have 3 deadlines, one for 6 o'clock, one for 7 o'clock, and one for 8 o'clock. So when I started at 3:45 to 4:15, I would work straight up until after the 8 o'clock news. There would be a 6 o'clock news, and perhaps I would tease some stories for the 7 and 8 o'clock. Then I would have time to produce them between 6 and 7 and 7 and 8. And so as the newscast started, I'd have 3 or 4 stories perhaps that were rather long in the 6 o'clock hour and no external sound or one piece to lead with. By the 7 o'clock, there were more stories and they were shorter, and by the 8 o'clock, there were maybe 7 or 8 stories and they were much shorter and punchier.
Oh, right. Good. And you were able to do it all yourself?
Yes.
Now, that's good. They have a thing, too many cooks spoil the broth. There's not a committee where you're trying to say, well, this has to balance that and everything. So you were able to do it. You knew what you're doing, set a template, work with it, and it must have been very satisfying.
I was satisfied that at least the BAI's audience was getting morning news, even though there was no budget for it. And I was satisfied that the people that I worked with were, grateful.
And they didn't set up
I
any
felt, I'm sorry, the people, those people, Sharan Harper, Errol Maitland, Bernard White, are people that have, I've been listening to BAI for 30 some odd years. They're people that I hold in extremely high esteem, even before I knew them. And so to even have the privilege of working with them, I felt honored. And to have them give me words of respect for my work made me feel, I can't describe it.
When did you get to relax? After this 8 o'clock news, then could you take a long nap?
Then I get in the shower and go to my job.
Oh, then you take a shower. Boy, you're working long 20-hour days or something.
Then I come back from my job, and as I said, I'm an activist. That involves going to meetings. I go to a village board meeting, a city council meeting. Go videotape something to produce for my Monday segment, and a public access producer.
You've been very busy.
Yes. I am.
Why do you think he's my friend?
That's right.
And he's an activist.
I've only been at it for 20 or 30 years. And
only 20, 30 years.
She's been at it my whole life.
I know. She's wonderful.
Can I tell you a quick
yes,
story?
Please.
And I want to go to that video.
I want to get to that clip. We got to get moving.
Because that's context. I met Colia in Chicago during the Green Party convention. I went out to cover Cynthia McKinney and Rosa Clemente.
Right. She played with Cynthia. So,
and Cynthia introduced us, and we hit it off. And so, in order to be connected to the internet, there was a cafe on the corner from our hotel that I had to go to. It had wireless. So Colia and I went there in the afternoons, and we would sit there, and as people walked by, she would pick out particularly young African-American people and ask them where they're from. And they would say, I'm from, the West Side, I'm from here, I'm from there. And Colia would ask them their name and then tell them where their parents or their parents' parents came from. And she was right, every time that they did it. Even though she had to lead them sometimes to it and say, oh, you're right.
That's really something.
It was remarkable.
It's so interesting, and Colia, we've talked with you on a number of occasions, so we're going to probably kind of let go. We could go there.
To BAI. I'm excited.
Let's go to
BAI. We want to go to it now. We got a problem coming up, and you got clips. We got to. This is like a news thing you have to put into a thing. You understand the discipline of the clock. So we want to get these clips in, but give a quick rundown of what's going on. Lead up to the first clip, and let's get those. Make sure we get those clips in.
As the Chiron has indicated, the graphic to people that aren't familiar with television, as the graphic indicates, I'm the banned news headlines editor for WBAI in the morning, and I was basically relieved of my responsibilities by the new interim general manager this past Monday, which was June 1st. The first clip that we'd like to show is the context for it. A week ago, on May 28th, a week ago yesterday, the local station board, which is the advisory board to WBAI, had a meeting. The bulk of the discussion at that meeting was a resolution to censor me because during the morning newscast, I dared to cover the fact that there's a coup underway at WBAI.
You called it that?
I didn't call it that until I was censored last week, and then I have been calling it because, in fact, it is a coup and it's defensible. So the first clip that you'll see out of this first video is the discussion by the woman that introduced that resolution, Andrea Fishman, who is the vice chair of the local station board, explaining why. And then part of that same video is the news director, Jose Santiago, saying in April during Fund Drive that he is proud of the fact that the evening news does not cover internal BAI politics because it's not newsworthy. Remember, this is a listener-sponsored station. Right. Our listeners have a very strong stake in what goes on at our station. And the very last piece of this clip is Juan Gonzalez from Democracy Now! Resigning in 2001 under the same circumstances and explaining why. So if we could go to that.
We're going to put all that together. It runs about 5 minutes?
Yeah, it's about 5-6 minutes.
Okay, well, we're doing that, and that's in the face of the fact that there's been a big change. And so here it comes now.
Of opening up the news to to information that is not available elsewhere. We must not endanger its reputation by allowing positions, personal positions, on different incidents that the community is confronted by on the news. That is not the place for this discussion. So this would result, this would result in censorship in itself. It does not allow full understanding of what is going on. And further, it adds to the public's distrust of what goes on at Pacifica. And it adds to the public's distrust of the air when such partisan positions or particular opinions are allowed on the air as if they were news. This is not an attempt to censor. This is an attempt to keep the airwaves open and welcome to public discussion, and an attempt to allow the public to feel protected by this airspace.
Point of order. Point of order. Okay. This motion is out of order because it violates the resolution passed by the Pacifica National Board on December 29, 2001, which lifted the previous gag rule against on-air discussion of internal Pacifica policies and management decisions. That resolution stated, quote, "It is hereby resolved that the gag rule is immediately eliminated," and was specifically ordered by the lawsuit settlement agreement in December 2001. It was affirmed after its passage by the judge supervising the settlement in January 2002. And let me just explain further that among the motivating factors for that board, excuse me, I want to explain my point of order. As to why, point of order. No, I haven't finished explaining it. One of the motivating factors for this decision was the censorship of the Pacifica Network News by Dan Coughlin when he dared to announce that there was opposition to the policies of Pacifica management, and he was then fired the next day. And this motion was passed by the board to say this can never, ever happen again under whatever guise. All right. So this motion's totally out of order.
All right, I'm going to rule that your point of order is not well taken because the LSB has no power to censor. The as I read it here, going through everything,
appeal the ruling of the chair.
Second. You'll come to order first. As I read it here, at the end, it comes to a final action, which is asking the acting general manager to take further measures to correct this violation of journalistic practice and ongoing abuse of the airwaves. That would be the LSB asking the general manager to do something. Something which would be up to the general manager to figure out exactly what to do.
Now, you've probably heard about predictions of further internal difficulties at WBAI, and I'm happy to say that you did not hear that from any member of the WBAI News Department. We pride ourselves in never using the precious airtime that we are allowed to promote any individuals or any groups or factions' internal political agenda. The News Department made a professional decision several years ago that the news is the news. We bring you the most thorough news report we can produce with the resources we're allotted, free and clear of any attempt to convince you, our listeners, to sign on to any internal political agenda. I'm not asking you tonight to support one faction or another here at WBAI. I'm asking you to support WBAI. We don't see you as followers, we see you as listeners. We see ourselves as public servants who must rise above petty politics and provide you, our listeners, with the news and information you need to make informed decisions.
Now, Amy, you know, we've been working together for 5 years now, and I have to tell you, it's since the show's inception, I've been very proud of the groundbreaking work that we've done on Democracy Now! And also, more importantly, as a longtime listener for more than 30 years to Pacifica radio programs, I understand the critical role the network has played in reporting important stories the corporate media ignored, and thus helping to shape a lot of the progressive thought and popular movements in the country. But unfortunately, I am resigning today, effective immediately, from Democracy Now! Because I've decided that the current management situation at Pacifica has become intolerable. And despite my hope that the majority of the Pacifica Foundation's board of directors would come to its senses, the situation has only gotten worse, the last straw being the Christmas coup at this station, WBAI, last month.
Okay, well, so that's context, right? And
Yes.
that thing with Juan Gonzalez goes back to '99 and so forth, when there was. Is there an analogy between what happened then?
Yes.
Amy was news director, and I guess that there was that, and then they were able to reverse that back in '99 or 2000 or so. And
These
so
things come
put
with
it in
struggle.
context.
Yes.
And does it compare to what's going on now in your estimation?
Absolutely, I believe it does.
Same forces at work.
I would say probably at the very back of it, yes. Whether they're social forces, that being essentially people that do not recognize the primacy of race in American politics and culture, and in each case, that's a commonality. Also, among white producers and white folks in general, an inability to take leadership from black folks. That's a commonality also that's driving it. This is kind of inside because you have to actually know the people to not be fooled by the faces when you see them.
Okay.
But there's been huge problem, vitriolic response to people having to take leadership from Bernard White because he's a black man in essence. And if you read through some of the things these people have written,
they're going to have trouble with our president.
Well, let me go back to the point because I don't want to lose the point here.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's me doing it, really.
I mean, the world.
The very first thing, the very first clip, at the end of it, they said that the only thing that this board can do is refer it out to the general manager for action. That was Thursday, May 28th. On June 1st, Monday, 2 business days later, the general manager terminated me. Now, she claimed the reason for it was that they were no longer going to have news issue from WBAI over the air unless it came from and was originated in the news department, headed by Jose Santiago, who was the second person that you heard speak, who said it's not appropriate to cover internal politics at WBAI.
Okay,
so
go on.
In other words, so the context is basically, we don't like the fact that you're talking about it. We're sending it out to the general manager. The general manager says, you're terminated. It's now the responsibility of someone who feels like we do on this issue.
Was that same sort of thing that Juan was talking about?
Then Juan, in an earlier coup.
That was earlier, yeah.
That's
the
correct.
Earlier coup.
That's correct. In time sequence, the first 2 happened within a couple of days of each other, and the last thing happened 9 years or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Juan Gonzalez, faced with a similar problem to the problem that faces both Jose Santiago and I, decided that being censored about things that are very essential to the context for his own reporting warranted leaving rather than accept being controlled by Pacifica.
But there was a counter, rather than everybody walking away from that, there was a countermeasure or a counter movement against it.
Several.
And it seemed to prevail.
There were several. Juan left that position and led.
Those kind of steps are now in place. Now, this is, what's the date today, Colia? It's June 5.
That's correct.
And the year is 2009. So there is a countervailing movement against what has taken place that you're describing in the current context.
That's correct. Of course, there's an entirely different political context where we have a black president on the one hand, not, if you asked him, he might not describe himself that way, but as a black man as president, and also, however, issues that are of great concern to black communities around the country being knocked off the table by him, saying that he's not going to treat black communities any differently than he treats anyone else. And basically as the face of American imperialism and international imperialism around the world, invading Pakistan, accelerating the war in Afghanistan, continuing the war in Iraq, continuing at least till the end of this year Guantanamo, and making an announcement that he's going to close it at the end of the year from a place that was complicit and actually partnered with the United States in torture.
Well, there are a lot of people who object to that context that he's putting forth in order to do outreach to others, I guess.
They say
world
context
outreach
is everything, right?
Yeah, right. And they also say it's going to take, if you start showing those photographs from Abu Ghraib, it's going to be taking up the whole consciousness, and it'll take all the oxygen out of the room of things like health care and other things that are more important. He'd have a rationale. Always leaders have that kind of thing for some sort of a context in which they're trying to do. But you said something interesting, and we got to keep moving, right?
Yeah.
But you said progressive. What does it mean to be progressive? I mean, like I said before, like the women who are thinking it's patriarchy that's the trouble would say feminism is what it matters. Once the women get the thing and get the power, then it'll be right. People who feel it's race would say it's the racism that was the problem and is the problem. And other groups, the Slovaks will think if the Slovaks could get the power, you know, how do we determine what is the mission of the progressive community in terms of where you put your priorities? And it's a many-splendored thing. Everybody thinks that their thing is the thing that's really important. And how do you put a focus on where the real heart of the progressive movement of the improvement of the human condition is to be found?
Honestly, I think Colia's answer to that particular question would be more interesting and probably 1,000 times more valid than mine.
Well, I think that racism obviously is a major issue in the United States outside of economic capitalism.
Yeah, that would be, in my view, more important.
It's like a rope around all of the other issues.
Yeah, okay.
If we unravel race in America, all the other issues will begin to fall in place.
You do think?
At least, yes, I know they will. And
okay.
We will be, and I mean, anybody that's been doing the issues of racism and sexism over the last 20 years will tell you that racism is a huge.
There are a lot of women who would say sexism would come first.
Well,
you know,
it's
they
a
would
little hard to say that.
Or some people say ageism or something. They come up with all different things.
I think
but
we
race
can come up
is
with
one.
a lot of things. But if we look at what's happening with radio today, that we see between 2005 and 2007 an increase in black DJs. After 2007 in Gina, we see not only a decrease in black DJs, we see a major decrease in black radio.
Is that a fact?
Yeah, it's a fact. And that's why I would like for Dawn to get through this, and maybe we'll have a lot of
okay,
time left
we should
to talk a little more about what is happening with black radio. It's a major issue that these radio chains are absolutely being
One thing I would bring up
yes.
quickly, he gave an address, real quick, and then we get to your clips. He gave a big address to the Islamic world there, and there's a lot of people, let's say, of the Zionist persuasion who think that the problem is that the world does not recognize the legitimate claim of the Zionists to their state and how good they are in the world, and Zionism is creeping in from an Islamic world. A lot of influence and power in the United States is around the AIPAC and the Zionist lobby. That some people would think that. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but Obama has been very clear that he is not in place to kill black radio. He has said that.
Okay, good. Yeah,
so
we're talking.
That issue is
I just brought that up as an aside. There are a lot of people who may not like WBI because they're people who aren't just kowtowing to the Israeli Zionist lobby.
There's probably something to that.
Okay, but get to your
We cover it
again.
differently.
But it's a many-splendored thing. But
first of all, on the issue of black
basic.
radio, just locally in New York City, WLIB essentially had to lease almost this entire broadcast day from sunrise to sunset to essentially a white radio project, Air America, for I don't know 3-4 years that happened.
That's where what's his name got what's his name? He's got a Minnesota senator. He was there.
Yeah, Al Franken. That's
Is that Laura Flounders or Laura somebody?
What about Laura? Laura was one. She's a producer.
She's one of the producers or on-camera people at Air America. And the guy in Minnesota just won. What's his name?
Yeah, Al Franken.
Al Franken. Yeah, that's yeah.
But this is a larger
or
thing.
National Public Radio.
Well, National Petroleum Radio, we call it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's another group of more moderate or seeming.
Well, it's corporate
finance. And there's a claim
financed.
that they're trying to turn it into another national
NPR. First of all, you have to start with what is the role of WBAI and Pacifica supposed to be. Our mission statement essentially is to provide a voice to the voiceless. And so then the question becomes, who are they and how did they become that way? Why are they still that way? And how do we provide a voice and what kind of voice? That's a series of questions that follow from that if you're going to pursue it to its logical conclusion. The current group of people that have seized control of the network, and if we have time to go into the mechanics of that, fine. If not, we have websites, which you'll see at the end of the program, that will tell you how to learn that. Essentially, their view is that you start with having a radio station that is financially viable and that is
as a good business model.
Right. You use
people.
Within the capitalist economy. They're looking at it from that model, and then at the end of the day, what do you have to pursue this mission? And then I am arguing that their perception of it is essentially a paternalistic one in terms of how to provide a voice. At its best, it sticks a microphone in the face of the people in the community that it deigns to either invite in or to go out on occasion and visit.
Or responsible voices, or corporate raiders will do that. Carl Icahn, they'll come in and say, bad management, you're no good, you're going to fall down, you need to save the group because we have a good business model and efficiency, and it happens to be President
Of course, and they were doing that on Wall Street forever. Now they're using our tax money so they can keep paying for their things. The way many of us see it, and I'll speak for myself, but I know that I've acquired this from the people I work with, and it makes sense to me, is that first you try to understand who the voiceless are and how they became that way, and what forces are maintaining them there. That's the first thing. Second, go ask them, what do you need and how can we be of service to you? And third, take leadership from them on that, and then use this communications tool as a part of the solution to their voicelessness in the first place. Not a simple solution of, here's a microphone, you have a voice for as long as I hold it on you, but rather we are empowering you to speak through the body politic.
Okay, so that's important. That's the thing. And the voiceless, Lord knows, the powerful have many voices, and the media is all...
They own it.
And that. But listen, one of the problems we have is the tyranny of time. We got about 18 minutes left. You got two clips. They're important. You put them together. Set them up for us. Let's make sure we get them in.
The very first one is Bernard White speaking about a week and a half ago after he was terminated by this group that seized control of the radio station, and describing both the terms of his own termination and some analysis of what's going on at the station. That's the first piece. At the end, essentially, we have a variety of clips from listeners asking, once in a while you hear me actually ask, what do you think about what's going on at the station? And if you like or dislike it, why? Those are listeners with one or two producers that are mixed in, that were at a meeting of the organization of a group called Take Back WBAI sometime.
We want to get that in. So we'll do two separate clips. So let's set that first one up. It's with Bernard White. Then it'll run, and we're talking with Colia
happened at
Clark.
the station last couple of weeks.
Well, well, what has happened at the station is that, let's see, as you know, last time I spoke to you and spoke to most people, I was on suspension. And I had maintained that they were just really being punitive and nasty, because the suspension was just to make sure that I wasn't able to get any money. It was a suspension without pay. If they had just terminated me like I knew that they would, that they were going to do, I would have been able to collect unemployment, but as it stands, I was unable to do that. It was supposed to be a 10 working day suspension. But on May 19th, they came to another conclusion. And on May 18th, they came to another conclusion. And on May 19th, Malcolm X's birthday, I wound up getting a FedEx that said that I was going to be terminated, or that I had been terminated as of the 18th. And you know, this is part of their design. This is part of a national effort. We've been focusing a lot on WBAI, but I think it's can be obviously seen now that this is more of a national effort. When you look at what happened in KPFK with Eva Georgia, who was a former general manager there, she was taken off by this same Grace Aaron. Armando, who was the program director of WBAI, he was forced out. The news director of Informativo Pacifica. He's been forced out. The Chief Financial Officer, Lonnie Hicks, from the Pacifica Foundation, he's been terminated. In New York, Anthony Riddle has been forced out, and I've been terminated. And there's also some talk about getting rid of the station manager at KPFA, as well as the station manager at WPFW. So, by the way, all of these people of color, they're either Latino or African American, and they, they're on the move now. They feel that they have gotten people in position so that they can begin to move. One of the tragedies of WBAI is that there are Latinos who are in favor of what's going on, because many of them think that they're going to get more time or another position, and they don't know that these folks are not interested in them doing programs, but they will use them if they can to justify whatever action they're about to take. So I hear that folks are dancing, some people are dancing at WBAI because they're so happy about what has happened, but things change, and some of the same people were dancing last time, and that smile turned into a frown. But there are some good people that have come together, really good people. You can see it on the website at www.takebackwbai.org, or you can also visit wbixradio.org, and you can get a good picture of what some of the opposition is saying. And right now that's key because of the gag rule of WBAI, no information is getting out. So many people believe that things are just going on as normal. They don't know that there's been a purge at WBAI, just the first stage of a purge at WBAI, or the relationship that it has with other stations around the network.
So if this is something that's going on, not just at BAI, but network-wide, do you have any theories or ideas about, it's obviously not just a few knuckleheads on the local station board that exercising such a grand plan. Who do you think is behind this, really?
Well, I think one of the major players in this is someone who's on the local LSB, and his name is Stephen Brown. And what has happened is that as a result of the settlement of the Christmas coup, the local station boards are no longer just advisory. They can make decisions. They can have impact on the day-to-day operation of the station. And it means that if you are wealthy, if you have like Bloomberg, you can just change the rules and put yourself in power and then begin to change reality. And that's what's happened at WBAI. It's what's happening throughout the network, where there's a very rich person who's been able to use his money to bend the reality and then begin to take actions as a result of it.
There's been some discussion on the internet about the current executive director, Grace Aarons, the connection with the Church of Scientology, including that apparently she had a falling out with the leadership there because she holds a fundamentalist view of Scientology, that their church is at odds with its founder, L. Ron Hubbard's philosophy. Do you think there's the possibility that some cult or other group is involved in what's going on with the takeover?
Well, I think that that information is up on the website, up on the internet, that you can hear an hour-long interview that Grace did around shunning religion, I think it was called. And ironically, while she was in New York, she kept talking about her son and all the various conversations they had. But on this video, she pointed out that her son hadn't spoken to her in 7 years. So I don't know whether it was the programming at KPFK that did it, but I do think that we have to be aware that people who are involved in this kind of cult behavior bring with them a certain ideology. And when you look at the ideology of Scientology, there is a lot to be questioned, particularly around the issue of race.
Thank you, Bernard. Anything else you want to say to the audience?
Well, just that, this has been characterized as a fight between me and some board members, some local station board members, but it's far greater than that. And it's going to take a while for people to catch up to speed on just what's going on. There are going to be some casualties. They are going to make WBAI a different radio station, a radio station that is less representative of the community in which it's supposed to serve. And they're going to try and duplicate that all across the network. So I am hoping that people will pay close attention to what's taking place, and that they'll respond, because don't just turn your back and say, well, that's what's happened, I'm not going to be a part of it, because BAI does not belong to them, Pacifica does not belong to them. It belongs to all of the people in the communities in which it serves. So folks have a responsibility to mount a campaign or join a campaign to try and make Pacifica as progressive as possible and not as reactionary as possible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's really good. He says we can make it as progressive as possible and not reactionary. And those are terms that come trippingly off the tongue. And I come back again to the idea, and we got that other clip we want to get in with some of the people talking, vox populi, I guess, on this issue. It's really interesting. What is progressive? Well, now, Colia brought up race, that's obvious. James Joyce, who was an intellectual, a poet, he's not political, he was a poet, and he said, history is a nightmare from which I'm attempting to awaken. That's a large thing. It's not just one political party or one political movement, and all the news seems to be reported political, but what do we mean by political? I mean by progressive. What do we mean by progressive? Is it Marxism? Should we have communism? That's what they used to fight. Remember, they used to have communism was the enemy, and we built all the imperialism from American shores with George Kennan's containment, and the enemy was communism, or it was an economic. But it's still, the thing that informs the political process is economics. Is it economic theory? At one time, Mr. President Nixon said, we're all Keynesians now. The economic system of the world has been hit upside the head like a mule with a 2x4. And it's all there. And what are we all now? And the basic question is one, if you're taking into account the whole world, and you're taking into account maybe something to be so comprehensively appropriate to be liberating of the oppressed, as well as the ecology, but also be something that the people who have been responsible for outdated institutions we've inherited out of history, if there's a giant transformation, so that everybody would be included. You got a very massive kind of inclusion in terms of that. You would be including the Illuminati and the people who are responsible for the outdated institution. What is the economic theory that informs the political process worthy of the name of maximally relevant consciousness in its evolutionary process? And what are we all now in terms of economic theory that informs the political process? And how do we just so trippingly say progressive is this, reactionary is that? That's what I'm trying to get at.
I mean,
those people who made the coup might say, we want to include some other people other than just a racist context or a feminist context or some of the other things, that's parochial, and we need a larger context of understanding, and it's too parochial in terms of trying to identify the one thing that makes progressive. Could you address that kind of, please?
That question reminds me of a Rodney Dangerfield movie, Back to School, when he's being quizzed, and there's a 35-part question that's posed to him. And it comes out the answer was 13, I think, or something.
Okay, well.
Well, we'll go to the beginning. I can appreciate the Joyce, that particular image, and I sort of, it characterizes my own approach to looking at history. If you want to, what we get from Marx is that thought theory comes from matter, from practice. We look back at what's happened first to understand where we are. and those things have happened in a material way. What is progressive in terms of, as a political term?
That's what you're arguing about.
It's a very, well,
Other than
let me get to it, because
just the politics of economic business models.
I understand.
And so forth. Yeah.
It's a very amorphous term that's used by people on all sides in one sense. To me personally, what it means is that looking at the current condition of humanity, it is that which will allow us to survive and live together, which those two things right now are severely at issue. The prospect of human survival. I couldn't agree with you more.
Weapon systems are now species lethal.
And even before.
Newly so since about 1970
by
only.
Design.
Something new is going on. So how do you get the measure of what is progressive, particularly one that includes those responsible for the outdated institutions?
Well, you start with
that have been unjust.
What is it that's necessary for us to survive? And I would go back to what Colia said before, in that if you're going to deal with issues of class and economics, you first must look at the things that enable the existing condition, and the largest enabler of that, the largest enablers of that are, and I'm going to put them in this order, race and class. And
I would
because
put them
here's
in
what
an
happens.
opposite way.
Here's what happens. Well, because class divisions are enabled by racism, particularly throughout the United States history.
Yeah.
If you are able to
world
look
history,
that too. But just look here within the context of the United States, which is a microcosm on the one hand and a reflection of what's been taken from elsewhere. And you will see that even the poorest white worker felt no commonality with a black worker and felt satisfied in his own oppression because he could always look down at someone.
Scapegoating traditionally, that's it.
If you remove the divisions that exist among working people first, working people from there together figure out the next step.
Okay, well that's good. And you know what the hell of it is we don't have enough. Put in a couple words. You only got a couple minutes left. We're not going to be able to run the folks.
Well, I'd just like to say, as I look at this, I'm always reminded of 1963 in Birmingham.
Thank you.
And Jackson, Mississippi, when we were trying to pull off a movement, to develop a movement, to mobilize people. And the black DJ, working with James Bevel, who now has gone on to glory, working with James Bevel, developed a schema where every morning they'd play a jazzed up version of We Shall Overcome, because the station was owned, of course, by whites, and because whites were listening all the time. So they'd play this jazzed up version. Whites not being that familiar with black music didn't know it was We Shall Overcome. And they would follow it with this little hoop. Hey out there, kids. Somebody out there give me a ring. Is it true that everybody's out of school today? School's out. Is it closed? Let me know, let me know, let me know. Are y'all going to be down at 16th Street Baptist Church?
That's right. That's like Twitter.
So all the kids would turn out thousands. So it became the power of what was seen as helpless people who were programmed began to reassert themselves. The revolt was on, and radio was it.
We're running out of time. Damn it, that's the turn of the clock. Thanks for coming in. Everybody should pay attention to what's going on in WBAI and in alternate cable television communications capability, because it's a big thing. Communication is like the DNA of the society, and it's really important to keep it open to an all-inclusive kind of thing. And these alternative systems, I would include the public access television along with the mission statement, as it were, in a certain large sense of the alternate system of of the progressive, Pacifica Network, are in the same ballpark. And we got to hear from some of those. And we have to have one that's going to be including of everybody. That's a little hard. We've never had the luxury or the technology that might make possible things that out of history were not possible to us. We got to keep that in mind. And there's a gigantic transformation. We mentioned just quickly that the weapon systems have become, after 200,000 years, species lethal. That's an existential new reality. What would be the opposite of that on a living side to that existential reality at the level of capability? My contention is we've transcended material scarcity as a reality.
Right.
All of the economic systems are predicated.
Not all of us.
It's always been not enough. We now have a capability of taking care of everybody. We have the capability and the ecology in a way we simply haven't had out of history. That ought to be one of the things that comes up intellectually in terms of the decision-making process. I would like to think Mr. Obama is trying to lead us in that.
I have no indication of that.
Intellectual